Alright, what's going on everybody? Welcome back to another video here on the channel, and today we're doing an update on the war in Ukraine. I know a lot of people were kind of worried that with the advent of Optimus news for Watch Optimus subscribers that I'd stop covering stuff like this on the main channel. That's not the case. I'm going to continue to do free news coverage, including coverage on the Ukraine war and other major topics, but if you do want to see more comprehensive news coverage of situations like this every day, well, pretty much every day, there's some days where we miss, but pretty much every day, new news updates, make sure to join Watch Optimus. You can do that by scrolling down to the join button just under this video, clicking that, and then checking out. It's $4.99 a month, or you can feel free to just stick with the free coverage that we do like in this video. So today we're going to be talking about the newest developments in the war in Ukraine, because Russia has been making some pretty questionable decisions recently, to the point where it's kind of hard to guess what their end game here is. I mean, like, we all kind of know what they intended to do from the jump, right? Like, they wanted to come into Ukraine, they wanted to have like this quick takeover essentially, where they just kind of marched their way to the capital of Kiev and everything, and that didn't really work out. Obviously, they faced a lot more resistance than they were ready for. And over the last few months, basically Russia's military supplies have been dwindling. They've been facing high casualties. There's been a lot of miscommunication in the upper ranks. There's been allegations of years of like supply theft from their forces and from contractors that's now holding back the war effort. But recently they've made a couple decisions I want to talk about in today's video that I just don't understand what exactly the purpose behind it is. I mean, you can kind of find a way that they can try and justify it, but even then, like, when you look at the grand scheme of things in a lot of these decisions, it just doesn't make sense. It's a waste of time, it's a waste of effort, it's a waste of resources, and they're just not handling it well. Russia has been handling this war extremely poorly. I mean, they're fighting the poorest country in Europe, and they're essentially losing. I mean, Ukraine is capturing new territory back every single day. Of course, they're suffering casualties too, but they're taking back territory in their country that's been invaded, and they've demoralized the Russian forces extremely. I mean, if it wasn't already demoralizing enough to get shipped off into a war that many soldiers don't even understand what they're fighting for, I'm sure it's a lot more demoralizing when the poorest country in Europe is also kind of kicking your ass on the front lines too, you know what I mean? But yeah, there's been some recent developments that I just don't really understand, and one of those is something that happened just over the last few days. Now, I don't know if you guys have heard about this or not yet, but I guess I'll start with the context behind this, right? So there was a massive bridge built between Crimea and Russia after the Russians annexed Crimea in 2014. The Kerch Strait Bridge, it's kind of viewed as like a legacy point for Putin almost, because, well, they invaded and took this part of Ukraine and they annexed it into Russia, and he built this massive bridge that, handles both cars and trains over the bridge. While somebody suspected to be Ukraine ended up blowing this fucking bridge up a couple days ago, right? There was this massive blast that went viral on social media, all these different videos of it. It partially collapsed the bridge. It was like a huge hit to Russia, and Ukraine pretty much immediately afterwards ended up putting out like a celebratory stamp from their post office. So Russia, obviously being at war with Ukraine, blamed them for the situation. Honestly, probably rightfully so. Ukraine is most likely the ones responsible for the blast. So instead, Russia decided to launch 80 different missiles at mostly civilian targets throughout Ukraine. They hit a couple like electrical power grid areas. They hit a children's playground in downtown Kiev. They hit a glass pedestrian bridge, which I guess is supposed to be something symbolic. I don't know. Not really the same when your whole bridge that connects two regions together and transports fuel across it through trains is destroyed, comparing that to a downtown sky pedestrian bridge, you know what I mean? Not really the same thing, but they hit like the German embassy building. I think they hit the Samsung headquarters in Kiev, just basically striking a bunch of civilian targets, and it killed a few people. It obviously sent the entire city of Kiev into a panic, because if you didn't know, Kiev hasn't been directly attacked in the war since June. Even in the early days of the war, Kiev was still relatively safe compared to a lot of areas of the country, and for that to just get struck by missiles like this, it wasn't the only place to get hit by missiles, but obviously it scared a lot of people in Ukraine and it caused a lot of damage. But then it comes out that Russia used military supplies to supply this that are already dwindling. Like, they're already running out of these missiles that they used in these attacks. They've been fighting for months now with the Ukrainian military and everything here, and it doesn't make sense, because if it's really over this bridge, you just wasted 80 missiles on civilian infrastructure and targets people who aren't even fighting you back. You're losing territory on the front lines. You're getting your ass kicked. It seems like every day there's a new map coming out where Ukraine inches forward on the front lines. And the best way you found to use these missiles was to target civilians? Like, I don't know. It's another escalation that Russia has done where they show they have blatant disregard for civilians altogether. They don't care about killing civilians. They don't care about destroying civilian infrastructure. As long as they pummel Ukraine, they really don't give a shit, man. And according to the Ukrainian main military intelligence directorate, they believe that Putin might have been planning this attack prior to them blowing up the bridge because they might have been trying to deflect for failing in cities like Kharkiv, Liman, and Izium, where Ukraine has basically wiped out Russian forces and taken these cities back. So essentially, this was either a retaliation for losing the fights in major cities and losing on the front lines, or it was retaliation over a fucking bridge. Either way, waste of military resources in a war that you can't afford to be wasting military resources in. And then over the last few days in the south of the country, along the front lines between Ukraine and Russia, where Ukraine has been swiftly capturing a decent amount of territory back and has been pushing forward towards the city of Kherson, the Russians have been resupplying their front lines with damaged and barely mobilized units. So Russia's at the point now, well, I shouldn't say they're at the point now, because they've been doing this for a while, and I was going to say that, but Russia's at the point right now where they're suffering so many casualties and getting their ass kicked so bad on the front lines that they're just basically throwing whatever they can at the Ukrainians. Like, they're taking damaged units, they're taking units with casualties, and they're sending them to the front lines just hoping to kind of fill the gaps. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be some master military strategist or something like that, but I think just about anybody can come to the conclusion that, yeah, if you're going to try and resupply the front lines, don't do it with shit that's broken. It just doesn't make sense. Like, they're just pushing whatever they can to the front lines, hoping and praying that they can get it to work out for them. And it's not working out for them. It's like the Russian military doctrine is failing so hard in Ukraine, and like it's embarrassing almost. Like, this is a country that was at one point thought to be like one of the top 3 militaries on planet Earth. You know what I mean? Like, they were supposed to be a legitimate threat to like the United States and to like NATO in general. And they're not even doing this right. You know what I mean? Like, it's fucking insane to me. But now another scary update in this whole thing has been how Belarus has been acting the last few days. Lukashenko, who's kind of like one of the leaders of Belarus, he ended up saying that there would be a joint military force of 10,000 soldiers between Belarus and Russia deployed. They didn't specify where. It's currently considered to be unlikely to be in Ukraine, probably because Belarus knows if they directly join the conflict on the side of Russia, they're going to get sanctioned to fucking death by the West, and that might actually be enough to increase support for Ukraine militarily. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that soldiers would get sent across into the front lines by NATO or something, but I feel like it's a lot more easy to justify doing something like that when Belarus joins into the war too. But right now, reports are suggesting that Belarus is handing over a bunch of tanks that were in storage to the Russians to use, which actually makes sense because Russia has been failing so badly. They've been giving up so many tanks by retreating and having their supply depots captured in the Ukrainian territory they captured, that the #1 supplier of tanks in the world to Ukraine is now Russia. Ukraine has literally got over half of their active duty tanks right now from Russia. So yeah, Belarus continues to support Russia, but these are the things I'm not really understanding that Russia's doing, right? They're wasting military supplies on civilian targets when they're losing to the Ukrainian military. And on top of that, they're like, at the same time, resupplying their front lines with like damaged and weakened units. You know what I mean? Like, you're wasting your military infrastructure on civilians while your actual military is fucking struggling. Like, it's the continuation, I feel like, of the same shit that's been holding the Russian military back this entire time, right? Like that mismanagement, that stupidity that these generals seem to have, right? So with that being said, thank you guys for watching. If you did enjoy, make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're brand new around here on the channel, follow me over on Twitter and Twitch at @SubToOptimus. Make sure to check out Shoptimus down below. Thank you to all my Watch Optimus subscribers. Your support helps the channel tremendously. And until my next video, guys, this is Optimus, well, giving you guys an update in Ukraine and signing out.